What's up, y'all? It's Debo Hall back at it with another video. Today I'm going to be covering the three main questions of Professor Wiki's class for my final exam. And personally, since this one is very important, I want to start off with question number 3 because this has the most information. And the first question I was asked was, explain the importance of the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942 and 43 for both of the German and the Soviet sides. How does soldiers on both sides experience the pinched battle? So that was the first question. And my answer to those is the Battle of Stalingrad. The importance of for the Germany was strategy. The main focus was to capture Stalingrad. If they win this battle, it will help Germans' southern flank and provide access to important resources they needed to fight this war. Also, if they took Stalingrad, it would be an ego booster, given the fact Stalingrad shares Stalin's name. Speaking of USSR, their importance to this battle was creating a turning point in this battle. This makes it even more important to the Soviets because they are trying to defend their home turf. So losing the city was not an option. And if they lost this battle, it would have opened the way to Soviet oil and resources, which it would give the Germans hope, and it would give them resources they need, and the value of the victory, right? It would have been a symbol of the Soviet resilience and strength to fend off these bullies that's been fighting everybody, that's been going from country to country, just terrorizing people. And that alone just would have set the tone. It sets the tone, but them winning this war definitely, I don't want to say put a nail in the coffin, but starts to put a nail in the coffin. The German soldiers' experience were faced with brutal winters, starvation, and street-by-street fighting. Because you gotta realize they're going to a new territory. They don't know, where they're fighting. They just feel like, hey, I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna take it, right? But they didn't really have a strategic plan as the Soviets did. The Soviets like, hey, this is our home. We know the terrain. They don't know the terrain. Let's make them fight on our terms. They're on our home. Let's make them fight on our terms. That's what they did. That's why they were successful. And the Soviets experienced, since they, as I mentioned, since they knew the terrain, they engulfed it, the Germans, and they made it hard to fight this war and win. The Soviets experienced, also harsh conditions too, but they're used to it. This is where they're from. They fought in close quarters, door to door as well, and many civilians remained in the siege too. So, for example, a pinch battle, by having to fight door to door, street by street, that's pinch battle. That's a strategy. Also, trying to attack the Soviets before they could retaliate showed that the Germans had a plan coming into this battle, but the Soviets also had a strategy because they were surrounded. They surrounded the Germans, and they're on their terrain, right? So they had a plan. They showed this strategic strategy because they made them fight door to door. They made them fight the game that they wanted to play on their field. They didn't let the Germans dictate this. And after this, I was asked another question. I'm sorry. Who had the upper hand and why? In what ways did the outcome of the Battle of Stalingrad decide World War II in Europe? So again, I wanted to come back and just say that the Soviets had the upper hand because they were fighting on their home turf, right? They had larger numbers of trained soldiers to fight, as well as better adaptation to the winter. The strategy of the Soviets were effective and helped them use their resources as an advantage. You know, the door-to-door fighting. They use this as an advantage. Their home terrain as an advantage, and it was a disadvantage towards the Germans. The poor strategy and pushing their soldiers nonstop without true strategic planning led to them like underestimating the Soviet ability to beat them, because they thought the Soviets were still rearming and like wasn't ready for them. So they said, hey, we're just gonna jump in, we're gonna take over this land, and they underestimated them. And the way the Stalingrad was decided in World War II in Europe was this was the first major German defeat. This shifted the morale towards the Soviets and the beginning. It began a force towards the westward push. The outcome of the Battle of the Stalingrad ended the hopes of Hitler's speedy victory over the Soviets and created more strain on his army, ultimately leading to his defeat. So, again, that's what I have for number 3. And I watched that video. It was in the documentary. It was a documentary, and it pretty much goes over this and it explains this. Not only did it cover everything I just said, but it shows in detail how this happened, like how it unfolds. So it's pretty cool. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit here. I'm gonna go to question number 1. Explain why appeasement made logical sense for Britain in 1936 and 38, but why it ceased to make sense in 1939. Discuss if any earlier British engagement could have changed the course of the war, and whether the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain deserved to be blamed for having waited too long to confront Hitler. So this one again, me personally, I feel like Hitler knew what he was doing in this, right? So I'm gonna cover this first, and I'll explain why. The appeasement made sense because for Britain, right, the terror, the time, the money, the loss, the soldiers, they were still fresh from World War One. Britain and France were deeply reluctant to enter another large-scale war. Economic constraints, Britain were still recovering from Great Depression, and it lacked military strength, right? And what I'm saying is the appeasement was a way for the British to rearm, right? It was a way for the British to catch a breath, right? So of course they needed this. Because they couldn't afford to go into another war. They couldn't afford that, but they could afford to rearm and restock their army, right? And why it ceased to make sense was because Hitler broke the Munich Agreement. He was gathering troops for expansion, and he made threats to Poland, and he annexed Austria, and he was making secret preparations for war, which was breaking the agreement, right? And the British had to get involved, which made the agreement ultimately cease to exist, right? So Germany, he invaded, technically Hitler, but Germany invaded Austria in 1938, Czechoslovakia in 1939, Poland in 1939 as well, which got the France and Britain involved. And if you want this source that I used to gather my information was the Second World War, Chapter 2, and I really scrolled down to page, I want to say 8, I believe, or 9. Let's say page 9, and page 7, and it talks about how the land was seized like even in page 6, like the Shuzek crisis, right? And it talks about like threatening a war and how Hitler invades these lands, right? And it's called this because they had no way to defend Hitler. Like it right here clearly states, even though it was not clear who would fight it, the Syrians were not powerful enough to resist the rearmed Wehrmacht without help. But the Red Army, the only nearby source of assistance, could come to their aid only by crossing Polish territory. So this is getting what is it saying? Is getting a lot of people involved that I'm not saying don't need to be involved, but it's breaking treaties if they get involved, right? And what makes this significant is the reason why I feel like it's partially the prime minister's fault, but it's not, because once you see, oh man, the Russians got it, they probably take a back seat, right? But when they threaten to invade Poland, that's when, all right, like the Britain's got to get involved at this point. That's what another thing. I feel like, I do feel like he's to blame. The Prime Minister Neville's to blame, because let me explain here. Chamberlain is to blame because he underestimated Hitler's ambitions and he was too optimistic. Like, he gave Hitler the chance to feel like he was invisible. Like, Hitler invaded what, two places before he was held accountable, right? Like, he invaded Poland as well, but like, he invaded too many places. Like, so you're like, okay, I'm gonna invade this place, nothing happened to me. I'm gonna invade this place, nothing happened to me. Like, and then now he invades again, and like, now everybody's like, okay, now we're gonna get involved. But at this point, he's already hounding him around. He thinks he's invisible. Like, he can nitpick anybody. He's going for anybody. So, that was my take on question 1. And lastly, question number 2. Why did Stalin and Hitler sign the Nazi-Soviet Pact in August 1939? Explain the advantages but also the disadvantages of the treaty of both sides. Finally, discuss why Hitler decided to break the pact and attack the Soviet Union in June 1941. Consider the military, economic, and also ideological reasons for attack. So, honestly, and these are my notes, by the way, guys. But so, what I just wanted to say is basically, Stalin signed a pact because he wanted to avoid war with Germany, while the USSR was still rebuilding its military. Right? That's the main reason. Right? Advantages like territorial gains, where the USSR to annex parts of Poland, the Baltic states, and Bessarabia. The Western powers have been slow and indecisive in renegotiating with the USSR, so the pact gave Stalin leverage and security. Hitler signed the pact to avoid a two-front war. He did not want to face Britain, France, and USSR together. Disadvantages for Stalin would be Hitler was hostile to communism. So compromising, like, that was a no-no, and it made it harder to silence the war. Like, they couldn't come together, you know what I mean? That's what made it really hard. And also for Hitler, a temporary truce with the USSR contradicted Nazi ideology and risked future betrayal. As I mentioned before, if they came together, that contradicted, like, he didn't believe in what they believe in, which is communism. He don't believe that. So if they come together, some of his people, he fears some of his people may turn communism, or see their way or how they live in, and it gets that propaganda out the window. He didn't want that. He wanted to be the dictator. He wanted Germany to be this pure Aryan race. And also, it made it like resilience on Soviet resources, and it created strategy dependence. Hitler broke the pact because Hitler saw Bolshevism as a racial and ideological enemy of Nazism. A war with the USSR was part of his plan for gaining the living space area. Economic reasons, that's pretty simple. It was that Hitler wanted to direct access to Soviet resources, especially oil, from the Caucasus. And Germany's swift victories in Western Europe led to Hitler underestimating the Red Army, and he believed a quick, swift battle could beat them as well, but he was mistaken badly. The reason why I feel this way is because, it's pretty simple. Like, he thought he could get away with like these attacks because he's been getting away with them, and he feels like he's getting closed in, and now he has to fight. He has to fight his way out, but his ego was too big. He just should have just kept it compromise, right? And that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit with the appeasement too. Like, people just thought, like, I'm gonna go back to Prime Minister and answer that question a little bit more. Like, for a Prime Minister, you really hold him liable, but at the end of the day, everyone thought, okay, this war's over. Okay, y'all just reunite. Don't build an army. Don't assemble, the simple stuff. But again, Hitler wants to get that living space area. He wants to bring his army together, and he kept causing the problem. And I feel like that's why the military, economic, and ideological reasons for the attack, because Hitler just felt like he was in control. Time and again, he just felt like he was invincible. But yeah, guys, I went over the questions, and for this question, I also used, I watched the Daily Moon, but mostly I watched this John Keegan, The Second World Strategic Dilemma, which talked about Hitler's strategic dilemma and a pattern of the invasion, why he kept doing that. So I'm out of time, but thank you again for tuning in, watching my video. My name is Debo Hall. Peace out.